Recognize Mr. Rohrabacher for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much for your leadership and calling this hearing today and organizing it. We appreciate that. Let me just note that when I got here years ago, 30 years ago now, there was the big debate as to whether or not we should put $600 million into the development of picture tubes. And we were falling behind. And come to find out, of course, of that $600 million, a significant portion of that would be used in developing analog picture tubes at a time when digital technology was sweeping into that industry. So not all the times when you spend money and you're saying it's for a specific end, are you achieving the goal that you want to achieve? In fact, sometimes cuts offer cutting people's budget and sometimes forces people to make priority decisions. For example, not putting money into analog old technology rather than into digital technology. And if you never terminate the least effective research that you're doing, you will drag down the most productive research that you're doing. So the fact that there have been responsible cuts to various programs is something that will actually, I think, make our scientific community more effective rather than less effective. And when it comes down to this issue, let me just note, this has been a terrific hearing. I want to thank the witnesses. I have a better understanding now of the challenge that we face. It sounds like to me, and let me get the pronunciation of Jim Kurose, you noted that we were actually ahead in the basic science, and we are ahead in that. But what it sounds like to me, Madam Chairman, that we are not really making the transition from the basic science into applied science in a way that America will remain a leading in this effort. Is there something we can do? Now, applied science is just another word, I guess, for, yes, applied for our defense, et cetera, but also commercialization is part of what we talk about in terms of applied science. When we didn't have the money for NASA to spend all the money we needed for various space transportation systems, we turned to the private sector, and now we have, with the commercial legislation that we passed, we have a very vibrant and important investment in space transportation coming out of our private sector. Now, is there something that we can do? I mean, I'm the author of the Commercial Space Act, so I was bragging about that. But is there something we can do to make the applied go from the basic to the applied and incentivize the private sector to invest money in the applied scientific approach to this issue? Mr. Kurose?
Well, thank you for the question. And in my earlier remarks, I actually talked about partnerships between industry and the National Science Foundation and the research community. And so really what you're talking about is use-inspired research. And I think one of the advantages of having that collaboration between industry, academia, and the federal government is that we are able to bring in use-inspired research challenges into the research. That's not a replacement for fundamental research, but it is important.
It's utilizing fundamental research.
It's utilizing fundamental research. And actually, new research problems can be suggested by the use and by the development as well.
I would hope that we can come up with some specific ideas how to encourage these private sector companies, which will utilize the information to actually invest in that transition between basic and utilization. Do any other witnesses have any thoughts on that?
So I agree with Dr. Kurose. Partnerships are important. Other things that can help are things like other transaction authority that will allow us to better interact between academia, industry, and the private sector and the government, because there are a lot of restrictions around IP that creates problems, and OTA will give us some flexibility there.
How about the DOE? Does it have some ideas on that?
Well, I would come back to the general concept that Dr. Kurose mentioned and also Dr. Williams, in that effective partnerships between government research organizations and private companies are a very good way to go.
Well, we've got to make it profitable for people to do that.
Correct, yeah. But that has succeeded in several areas in Office of Science programs, and it serves to bring together researchers from essentially the commercial environment and the government-funded side. And often it's beneficial enough to the companies that they put their own resources into that as well. So I think that's one of the most effective ways of accelerating the transition of basic science into commercial applications.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, now